What's up, guys? Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gaglione, and I've been involved with powerlifting and strength coaching for over 19 years. So, if you're someone that kind of follows me quite a bit on other kind of social channels, especially like on Instagram, been kind of quiet like on my stories. I've been outside of also just like not feeling so great physically. I don't need to get into all the specifics, but I had some issues with my CPAP machine. I have sleep apnea. It's one of the issues of having a big neck and being too fat. And I just haven't been like feeling great. Just been some kind of annoying kind of things going on personally, and just kind of dealing with a lot of stress and just kind of feeling a little bit of stuck and frustrated in terms of the message I want to put out there, and I want to try to be very careful. Um, Old Spider-Man quote: "With great power comes great responsibility," and I'm just trying to articulate our message in a way that's positive and beneficial for everyone that's receiving it. And one of the things I've even been kind of pondering is even just like, do I want to call myself a powerlifting coach? Do I want to kind of lean into that? Because at the end of the day, for those that don't know, I'm a strength coach at heart. And I kind of got my start in 2006. The reason I kind of got into powerlifting, I really always enjoyed training for wrestling and football. Wrestling was my main sport. The reason I got into powerlifting early on at 18 years old was I didn't feel I was good enough to compete at the next level for wrestling. I never really had a lot of athletic ability in terms of power, in terms of reaction time, in terms of speed. Um, I never had like a 5 second or below 40 time. I never had a 20 plus inch vertical jump. And those were things I tried to improve. I did kind of take a liking to lifting. I was able to kind of set records in the trap bar deadlift. I did lift at about 585 in like the low 200 range. So just as like a general like measure of strength, my form wasn't too great, but just to kind of give you an idea. So I always kind of like felt like I had at least a little bit of a propensity towards getting stronger. And what I felt like in strength training is I felt like the more effort I put in, the more in control I was of myself. Whereas with wrestling and football in particular, especially as a team sport, I never really felt like in control of that, which is why I gravitated more towards wrestling because I felt like it was more just black and white, like lifting weights. You kind of lift the weight or you don't. Of course, there's judging errors. Of course, there's standards, but for the most part, powerlifting is a pretty black and white thing, and I felt like I was very in control of my success. But ultimately, I kind of got injured. I tore my hamstring, and that's kind of my first football practice back as a senior in high school. And I kind of ended up wrestling on one leg. My goal was to be an all-county wrestler. I made it to the round to place. I lost in double overtime. I got illegally slammed. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that if I was healthy, I knew if I trained more, quote unquote, optimally, if I had kind of if I was more resilient, if I didn't pop my hamstring, and my leg strength was a big strength of mine. It always has been. I'm kind of known for squatting, first and only known man to squat 800 pounds in 6 different weight classes. I squatted 1,000 pounds in training, 900 in the contest. And regardless, equipped or not, it's strong. A lot of people have never felt 4 digits on their back. I felt that on several different occasions. I never got the chance to do it in a meet because it could due to health reasons and just due to being 335, 340 pounds at 5'8". Um, you know, and hey, maybe I'm even a little shorter now after putting 1,000 pounds on my back. But I digress. So I've always kind of been a strength coach at heart. And one of the things that really kind of grinds my gears in particular when people kind of throw the word coach around. So number one, especially online coaching in the powerlifting space, most of it is just glorified programming. And I think the programming is really important. I think as you get more advanced, the programming considerations become more and more important. But one of the things that I've kind of found for kind of the vast majority of kind of like the bell curve, if you will, and if you think about like the distribution of the population and then the distribution of the population of just kind of active powerlifters, I think that there are other kind of factors that are kind of more important. And one of the most important factors is your consistency and your intensity. That was something I learned from Stan Efforting. You need to have good effort, you need to put in good efforts for a long period of time. And for most people to kind of achieve your kind of, and then there's other things like if you kind of dabble with performance enhancing drugs and things of that nature and kind of go with that untested side, you could potentially increase the lifetime a little bit. But I'd say for most people, to be truly great, it's going to take 10 years. And then to be truly great with a extent on the fast track, I think it's going to take a minimum of 5 years, but more likely 10 years. I'd say 5 years if you kind of have really high frequency training, and 5 years if you're really aggressive in your approach. But for most people, it's going to take 10 years to be truly great at anything. So, top of the top, world class, elite, international elite, whatever classification. Just for example, for me, I feel like I have kind of average athletic genetics, maybe slightly above average strength genetics. Um, I totaled a little over 1,000 pounds my first meet. And, with the use of increasing and that was at 198 pounds, while increasing my body weight, while also kind of learning powerlifting equipment, probably one of the only people that I could think of that has kind of, you know, almost doubled their competition total. Now, obviously, I added layers of equipment to that as well. But again, I think that's a very, very rare feat. And then if you kind of go into further detail, how many people, own, offer kind of physical locations to train, let alone two? How many people in this space, uh, offers online coaching, offers multiple locations? I have New York and Delaware locations for our physical gyms. How many people offer events in multiple locations? How many people have had four-digit squats on their back? How many people have coached multiple all-time and American records? How many people have been involved in the sport for, you know, nearly 2 decades plus? The list gets very, very small very quickly. How many people are, kind of doing educational events with the United States military? Just kind of did our first clinic with the Air Force, which was great. We're looking to do more with them. How many people have spoken at strength symposiums at multiple kind of colleges over the years? So that list becomes kind of smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's just not to like toot my own horn, just to kind of just show you that I do believe that my opinions, my commentary holds some value. And let alone, and also just because like I care. There's a lot of things that I do behind the scenes where I may lose money. Might again, and as a family man now, it's not even just about money. It's about time. It's about resources. When I run an event, it's time away from my family. Oftentimes, if I'm traveling, it's time away from my family. Every single time. And it's hard, but I do really care, and I do believe that helping people get stronger is really important. But one of the things that's been really challenging is trying to figure out, like, especially in terms of like the sporting context of powerlifting. Now, again, powerlifting is an avenue to test your strength, much like potentially weightlifting could be, much like strongman could be, kettlebell sport, combat sports. Your strength comes in many forms. There's things like street lifting now, which is cool, weighted calisthenics. The reason that I always go back to powerlifting, and then for those that are not familiar and for those that don't know, I've competed in kettlebell sport. I joined a CrossFit gym for 2 months, and I've done Murph on occasion, which is that hero workout around Memorial Day, which is essentially bodyweight calisthenics and I'm going to say running in air quotes because I wasn't very fast. I competed in wrestling, obviously, so that's kind of like a combat sport that requires body awareness and strength. I have not competed in weightlifting, but I've kind of done a lot of clinics and stuff. So I have some weightlifting kind of experience, also some minimal weightlifting experience. CrossFit, I was never really kind of good at that. The power and the skill and the athleticism element. Obviously, powerlifting, I've done a few strongman contests. I was pretty good at the car deadlift. At my best, without training for it too much, I was able to do a trap bar deadlift for 700 for five, which is still pretty good. And I was able to do like I think like 700 to 800 pound yokes. I think I did like an 800 or 1,000 pound tire. So I've done like some decent like strongman feats. Was supposed to do a strength lifting meet, but that got canceled. So, anyways, I have a lot of experience in other strength sports. But one of the things that I always kind of go to with powerlifting, it's the most scalable, it's the most accessible, it's the lowest requirement in terms of technical prowess. The squat, the bench, the deadlift, and you can kind of argue like the sumo deadlift, or if you have like really crazy arch and stuff. But typically, to actually compete in an event, the bar is pretty low, and you could also do single lift events. Now we have things like strict curl, which I've also competed in, which I'm an advocate for, which I think for a lot of older folks the utility of single lift events is often underutilized. So as you kind of get more banged up, as you get more mileage on you, it's much more manageable and it's much more reasonable to be able to compete at a fairly high level, or just even like a competitive recreational level in like a single lift meet. Can you be a bench only guy? Could you be a deadlift only guy? Could you be a strict curl guy or gal? So whereas something like a strongman contest, even in a novice division, if you just can't simply like do the weight in the time frame that you have to prep for the contest, you're going to zero out in the event. So that's where same thing with CrossFit. Even with scaling options, you may not be able to physically do the event. Whereas with a powerlifting meet, again, if you could do the empty bar, and you could always kind of scale it down on the day, you could reduce your opener for the day. You don't have to start. You can be as conservative or as aggressive as you'd like. So that's where I kind of think that having a goal in mind that's kind of meaningful and having something to work towards that's challenging, that's going to excite you, that's going to keep you coming back to the gym. But the kind of the missing element in all this, and this is where I'm not even sure what I want to title this, but the thing that's kind of really worrisome for me is where the sport is going. And I'm also kind of paying attention to how things are kind of unfolding with strict curl. I'll speak with strict curl a little bit because I do feel like it's not to say that strict curl has also been around for quite some time. I don't think it's been quite around as long as powerlifting. And for those that don't know, a little bit of history about powerlifting. I'm not like a strength historian by any means, but in the earlier kind of 1900s, when like weightlifting was the prominent strength sport, putting a weight over from the ground to overhead was kind of the measure of strength, and the clean and strict press was kind of the event. Eventually, they got rid of this clean and strict press because the strict press got less and less strict, and it became more and more layback and kind of double laybacks, and sometimes it was hard to kind of tell were the knees bending, were the knees unlocking, what was excessive. It became very hard to judge. So and I'm sure also three lifts, it makes the meet run longer. So they eliminated the clean and press and he elected to keep the snatch and clean and jerk. So essentially like a big part of the strength element was kind of taken away. So a lot of the weightlifting training and athletes kind of just shifted towards more of a skill and power sport versus like a pure kind of strength sport. So that's kind of where like odd lifts kind of came in. It wasn't always squat, bench, and deadlift. Sometimes it was like, there might be a curl in there and some other lifts. Before we had bench press, a lot of people would do floor presses and different things of that nature. But eventually the squat, the bench, and the deadlift became the contested events. And then, powerlifting kind of evolved into equipped lifting. And then we kind of see this kind of raw boom around like kind of the 2010, 2012 range. And that's kind of like, oddly enough, Gaglione Strength, the company, was founded in 2011. So I was kind of ahead of the curve because I had experience. A lot of times you had to find a specific federation like a WNPF, like 100% Raw. Like if you were a higher level lifter, you would go to Raw Unity. 9 years of amazing Raw lifting for that kind of unification. And what I loved about Raw Unity is everyone kind of came together. So anyways, when I kind of got interested in powerlifting, when I was kind of on the back end of when I kind of decided I was going to, essentially, stop wrestling and then shift my focus toward powerlifting and have a competitive outlet there. Raw lifting was really simply a means to build a foundation before you kind of got into equipment. And there was kind of really two paths that you could take. You can go the multiply path, monolift, typically untested. I would have loved, and this is something I'm going to probably talk about with Jeremy Hartman today, who was a great coach out of the USAPL. I would have loved like a tested multiply. It just wasn't a thing that existed. And the people that I were around were multiply lifters. I just kind of the APF was still very popular. And so that's kind of like, and then the McClassen family had a federation called the Syndicated Strength Alliance, and we had people like Chris Taylor and John Benor of East End Barbell. Yeah, I think it was East End Barbell. I don't think it was East Side. I think East End Barbell. Anyways, I could be saying that wrong. But John Benor had like a 2,600 pound single ply total, still one of the greatest single ply totals of all time. And then, Chris Taylor was, 900-pound squatter. I've seen him do like 900 to a one board. I believe his best bench press was like in the eights in the actual competition, and elite in multiple weight classes and a very high level lifter in his own right. So, and then I kind of learned from people like Vinny DiCenzo, who is one of the first and only known people, to my knowledge, who's bench 600 raw in three weight classes, also a 900-pound shirted bench. And as someone that's also kind of gone through a weight loss journey, he's doing a better job of me. I kind of put a lot of weight back on, but so he's a big inspiration, was someone that kind of helped me learn the bench shirt early on. So that was one route you could take. And then there was the kind of the single ply route. And just for me, like even back then, I was influenced a lot from, I don't know, I was just inspired and exposed to people like Chuck Vogelpohl. I remember like his first 1,000-pound squat. So like in the early 2000s, like West Side was in its heyday. And the other reason that I always kind of gravitated more towards West Side is, again, a lot of people don't know, but West Side, even back then, they still worked with a lot of athletes. Louis still consulted with a lot of football teams. So that style of training was pretty prominent in like sports performance, box squats and speed. And if you look, people like Joe DeFranco was local to us as well. People like Zach Evanesh. So a lot of those people, a lot of the really well-known local strength coaches, Zach Evanesh and Joe DeFranco were people that I was kind of following closely. They were very close by in Jersey. And then you had people like Jay Ferrugia, which I didn't really follow quite as much, but they were all kind of influenced by like Lead FTS and Westside Barbell in some capacity. So I think all of that, being like a sports performance guy as a coach, and then kind of being exposed to Westside Barbell and those types of lifters, that was kind of what was more popular on the East Coast in my area. And I just was never exposed to single ply lifting. But even back then, like the WNPF had like had monoliths, and I just always thought that that was better. I don't know. I didn't really kind of worry about deadlift bars and calibrated plates and things of that nature, but just lifting out of the monolift and just seeing who could lift the most weight humanly possible without like an asterisk. We didn't care about like, oh, did you walk that out? Did you, and even just as an athlete, I never really understood the idea of like kind of like arguing with the judges or whatever. Sometimes even, it's just you kind of sometimes you get a call, sometimes you don't. We see this in wrestling, we see this in football, we see this in baseball, and you just kind of roll with the punches. And sometimes you get a call, sometimes you don't, and you kind of adjust to the conditions of the day. Whereas some people are so like worried about, I don't know, optics and things like that. And again, I think if it's an all-time world record, it should be reviewed and stuff like that. But in terms of in the crux of the individual competition, if everyone has the same judges and everyone has a consistent standard, the main thing is that you want to see consistency. I think that the judging standard has actually gotten maybe too quote unquote strict over the years, where again, I've spoken at this at length. You're seeing a lot of lifters on the raw side and super heavyweight side, like a Blaine Sumner, like a JP Price. And again, I don't want to speak for these guys, but these are just look at like Brandon Lilly and stuff. There's a lot more injuries and issues with the lifters that were doing world record numbers out of stands. If you look at a lot of the back issues that like Ray Williams has had, and I believe, and this is kind of where it kind of goes into the kind of the strict curl a little bit too. So like if the level of the athlete is increasing, but the equipment doesn't evolve with the athlete, you're going to start to kind of see issues, which we have. So that's one of the issues that I'm not really a fan of, like the ABS competitions, using like a power bar. For those that are not familiar, it's one of the best productions, if not the best production for untested powerlifting. They have some meets out of a monolift. They have some meets out of stands. They have some meets with power bar, some meets with, more traditional squat, bench and deadlift bars. So, again, now that you have athletes that are squatting 1,000 pounds raw, you got to think about what is that oscillation doing to the spine? What is that oscillation doing to the pelvis and low back and the hip complex? And there's no support. There's no like squat brief that's kind of compressing and protecting the hips and low back potentially. So even someone like a Julius Maddox, I believe if he was using one of the specialty bench bars at his peak, so he wasn't kind of dealing with that oscillation, I believe that would have been more stable for him. And I believe he would have hit an 800-pound bench in competition in his prime. Not to say that his window probably is closing, but I think he still could do it if he can muster up. The key at that level is stringing together enough training without getting injured, without having a setback, which can be challenging. And the older you get, the more obligations you have, the more mileage you have on you. But so anyways, the barbells that we're using now are probably not meant for an 800-pound raw bench. They're probably not meant for a 1,000-pound raw squat. And then when you're doing meets out of stands, um, there's no like safety mechanism. There's no like kind of fail safe if the spotter makes the mistake, if a spotter kind of gets hurt, if the athlete dumps the bar. So I think that it's just really important that we are always looking at safety and evolution of the sport in that sense, in terms of barbells. And even if, again, people kind of, so like, there is you still need to kind of set limits, but as the athletes evolve and the strength kind of increases and as the performances increase, I think the equipment needs to advance with those athletes to kind of keep them safe, if that makes sense. So one of the kind of arguments that are kind of happening with strict curl, should you use a more traditional easy bar with like, more modest bends, like an OBZ? In the Mr. America contest, we're using a Hampton bar, which is not, it's even, I think, harder than the OBZ. And then, they have bars like they have in like some of the Eastern European and Russian that are really, really close, really pronated, really deep. Some people call that a U bar. And then in America, most traditionally, we have like a gopher bar, which again has deep bends. But just like anything else, you still need to kind of understand the technique of it. There's more technical nuances to some of those bars where it wants to flip on you. But essentially, if you're a little bit more pronated and the weight is a little bit closer to your elbow, it's going to be less joint wear and tear. It might be harder on like your grip and those sorts of things. But again, I think the analogy of like using a squat bar versus a power bar, the squat bar is going to increase the longevity of the athlete and the stability of the athlete. The deadlift bar is going to increase the likelihood of a better starting position, a little bit less lower back stress. So I think these are all positive things. And as long as everyone is able to compete on the same bar and we have kind of records, again, it can be like kind of challenging. Do you want to have records for a stiff bar versus a deadlift bar? Do you want to, have sumo? But as long as people understand, and there's kind of notes in history, I think it's totally fine. But I think that you need to like think about not just in order for the sport to continue to grow and evolve, you also need to look out for the athlete's health. And that's where I think that sometimes when you start to kind of put too many limits and too many qualifiers, I think in the sport, in the record keeping context, I understand like if it was only walked out, only a power bar, that maybe is more pure in the sporting sense, but in real life, when we're not in a vacuum and these numbers, the performances are increasing. I said now you have 1,000 pound raw squats, now you have 600 pound raw benches. Is the equipment up to par? Is the equipment going to hold up? Is the equipment going to are those poundages going to put the athletes at a greater risk? And the answer is yes. So outside of all of those things, those are kind of some why I think that using a monolift, using specialty bars for powerlifting to keep the athletes healthier and safer is going to be a good idea. Like the use of safety straps and things of that nature is going to be really important. The other thing is, and you see sometimes, especially with those whippy bars, the walkout can kind of get quite dangerous, especially if you're on a stage. I've seen that happen sometimes. In the case of strict curl, same thing. If certain bars are going to be put your bicep more exposed, your wrist, your forearms. Like I said, I was having some issues with my forearm for a while because of some kind of training with an OBZ bar, also kind of trying to deadlift on the same day. But I digress. So these are things to kind of think about in terms of standards, but also like thinking about the safety of the athlete. But the one thing I would do want to just kind of touch on is also just the culture of powerlifting and kind of where it's shifting and maybe some potential danger. So I kind of had a little bit more of an emotionally charged podcast about the dangers of kind of supporting tested lifting and some of the things. And it kind of ties in with that. But I think that like what people really need to realize at some point, like you're gonna, if the longer you kind of do this, you're gonna be kind of past your competitive prime. For most people, I would say if you think about this on a bell curve, like a normally distributed population, most people are going to probably do one meet and then exit. So probably a lot of people exit the sport or exit strength sports in general. I would say between 6 to 18 months, because typically that's going to be the time where the explosive growth is going to stop. If someone has more of a propensity towards strength, that maybe they have better genetics, they're more explosive type 2 muscle fibers, they're just more athletic in general. They're more mentally tough. These are all hard things to kind of quantify. But I think that those types of athletes, they might stick around for 3 to 5 years. I wish I don't have like Larry's open powerlifting. I think, his career might have been, I don't know, between 5 to 8 years. or something like that. And there was some kind of time off, on and off. But essentially, he had probably a good 5 to 6 year run. And then he also started to get other opportunities in terms of his quote unquote fitness influencing career. So I kind of understand. I don't think that I kind of understand of like why he exited when he did. If he didn't have those opportunities and he was maybe taken care of financially in other ways, I think that he could have had another couple of years. And also, if he was willing to kind of potentially sacrifice his body and roll the dice a little bit more in terms of being heavier, potentially being a little fatter, potentially being trying to he had a hard time once he kind of got closer to like 290, 300 ish. He always felt and performed better in like 275 to 285 when he broke the 308 record. When he hit the 2370 at the Arnold um, back in 2020, he was weighing in like the low 280s. And I believe that he was capable, if he didn't rip a callus, he would have hit a 2400 total then, which still is like, it's still insane. So he didn't really have a stars aligning day, but he nailed a good squat, he nailed a good bench, and we kind of deadlifted what we needed to. His best deadlift was at the current U.S. Open with the 400 kilos, and with some wide hundreds and stuff, he was able to pull 900 in training. So there was definitely some more meat on the bone in terms of the deadlift. And I believe if he learned knee wraps, I believe if he got bigger, I think he would have been like right up there with a Colton, right up there with Dan Bell and stuff, doing like 2,500 plus as like a 308 or as a full 308 or super heavyweight. But anyways, so the reason I kind of just bring that up, I think that for someone like that, that's kind of pushing the envelope of human potential, someone like that might, and was a very good athlete. I believe that Larry could have been a great football player, or just really honestly a great whatever he chose. He started to hit world record performances. He was flirting with world record performances with like a log lifts with strict curl, just to kind of show you without too much specialization. It just kind of just shows you that he just was strong. It just kind of show you that powerlifting is a great foundation for whatever you do, and to good measure and test of your strength. So after that, I think that for more people with like more normal genetics, it's going to be and maybe going to be a little bit more conservative with your programming approach, a little less frequency, um, maybe spreading out your contests more. Probably like if you can kind of stick around for 10 years, that's going to be the sweet spot for your potential. I hit my first elite total around like 13 years in. I did have some injuries. I had some health problems, so that kind of prolonged some things. And then probably some of my best performances in terms of like pound for pound and actually on a platform were probably closer to like 15 years in. So from like 2020 to 2023 were my best like cons. So I became better as an athlete, even though I was kind of quote unquote weaker. In the 2014s, 2015s, I could do good mornings with 600 pounds for reps. I could squat 700 in just a belt. My raw bench press was better. My raw deadlift was better. Um, but I wasn't healthy and I wasn't able to put it together on the platform. But that being said, I think that I took my body and my lifts and my competition pretty much as close to as I could have. But I don't think I would have gotten anywhere near that without the team. So that's kind of, and it was a long-winded way to kind of get to this, but I think that people need to, the stuff that I really kind of don't like to see in terms of the culture of powerlifting, is that what I kind of see is that most people are gravitating towards a 24-hour gym. They want to have ultra convenience. They want to have all the contest equipment. They want to have the kilo plates. They want to have the combo racks. They want to have their snowflake program, something completely special to them. If there's 10 combo racks and there's 10 athletes going, it's very rare that anyone's going to work together. Maybe they'll spot each other here and there if they know each other, but more likely than not, they're not going to help each other. Um, you see it all the time. I see it with some lifters here and stuff. Some people will be kind of lifting. An accident happens, they kind of fall down, they fall over with weight because a combo rack's really not a great. Um, you should probably be, even though it's less specific, you should probably just be going with a power rack with like a rod and pipe or a safety strap, something like that. Um, and even with some of like the benches, sometimes the face savers for the benches, a lot of times the athletes don't set them up, or there might be some space, and the athlete can kind of still get caught. But regardless of even like the safety factor, I think that if you look at like when kind of the world was shut down in 2020, I think that we've gotten more and more kind of like antisocial. We're more on our phones, we're on our devices. We're not really like learning to work together. We're not really kind of doing stuff in person anymore. A lot of people are just they'll go on they want to instead of going to a meet, they're like, "Oh, is there a live stream for that? Can I just watch it on the live stream? Like, why don't you go to the meet?" You know? And I think again, like obviously I know if there's like a big competition or something, but again, the local events are like not really they're really the mom and pop, the local events, the local gyms, all these things. People just want to have like ultra convenience. They want to kind of sit by on their phone. They want to kind of just not really commit to anything. One of the issues with like a 24-hour gym is that like because you have so much accessibility, um, maybe you're not as committed. Maybe instead of like saying if you're part of a crew. So again, when I kind of grew up in the equipped lifting era, if I needed, again, of course, you could obviously put your equipment on yourself. You could wrap your knees yourself, but generally, if you're in a bench shirt or something like that or a squat suit, you're going to need someone to pull the monolith for you. You're going to need someone to hand you off on a bench. It's not to say it can't be done, but it's much harder. Whereas if you're walking out a raw squat, if you're taking out a bench yourself and you're raw, and then obviously deadlifts you can do by yourself, but it was kind of like a necessity to have a crew. And, besides the benefits of safety, besides the benefits of like live queuing and things of that nature, if you had experienced training partners, of course, you have that camaraderie. You literally have people that have your back. You have people that really care about your well being, care about your safety. They want to see you succeed. You're going to have friendly competition. You learn to work with each other. When it's your turn, all eyes are on you and you're getting that attention. And when it's someone else's turn, you're kind of giving back to the team. You're spotting, you're helping load, you're kind of taking some brunt. And if you have aspirations of, becoming a family man or woman or a wife, a husband, a father, a mother, sometimes you do need to like be selfless. Sometimes you do need to um, just unconditionally love somebody and put effort towards someone else, keeping them safe, helping them out with something. Sometimes you have to be, quote unquote, inconvenienced. Sometimes, your daughter or your son might be sick. You might need to kind of care for them. You may need to kind of pitch in around the house. You might need to do this. And, I'm very grateful for my wife. She does so much to help kind of me manage, the two businesses. She helps with events and we do a lot and obviously, yes, these things are businesses and they do need to make money. And I, do charge for a lot of my services, but there's still a lot of things that we do that are either we're, potentially losing money on, we're sacrificing our weekends. We haven't gone on our honeymoon. We haven't gone on a vacation. Um, we kind of besides going out to eat here and there for, we kind of like live below our means. We put a lot of time, money, and effort back into the sport of powerlifting, into our events. And again, it's because we care and we do believe that there is a need for people to get stronger. There is a need for people to learn to work together. There's a need for community. There's a need for teamwork, learning teamwork. It's something that we're trying to foster in with the girls. You know, I just think that a lot of people, I think that's the culture of powerlifting. It's kind of, and social media in general, we're kind of feeding into more like narcissistic behavior. We're kind of feeding into more kind of this celebrity status. And I think a lot of people in powerlifting, I don't think they'd be doing it if they couldn't get clicks, if they couldn't get likes, and they couldn't get attention. And it's fine to like want some significance, but what about growth and contribution? I kind of talk about this a lot. Like when I was kind of starting out, I was kind of trying to be heard and stuff. But now that I've coached the all-time records, I've coached the American records, I've had 1,000 pounds in my back. But I am finding myself more and more that I kind of need to remind people of my expertise. We just did a clinic with the Air Force. And then you have kind of people that are kind of coming in. Um, it's very frustrating when you have other meet directors that don't want to work with you. They don't want to communicate with you. They don't want to. They're not kind of seeing like the ultimate. They're only kind of worried about themselves and their event and the money that's in their pocket. And I understand that people need to eat, people need to make a living, but um, it's just the sport has kind of shifted more towards like this individual mindset. And with especially when it came to equipped powerlifting, it felt like again when you were part of a crew, it just was different. It was just like I think the culture was more tight knit. Um, and I just don't know. I don't know what the answer is because I think it's important that I'm trying to like consume more content of like kind of this new age powerlifting. I'm trying to understand the mindset of these people because ultimately most of the people that I train and that I enjoy working with are kind of 35 up. We even have people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. They're like, I kind of jive with those people a little bit more. I'm 38 right now. I've been again involved in the sport since 2006. But I also understand that the people in their teen years and the early 20s, the junior lifters, eventually they're going to become the open lifters. They're going to become, kind of my demographic. So I'm also trying to be mindful of maybe they can't afford our coaching, maybe they don't want to afford our coaching, but how can I get those people kind of in tune with that team aspect? How can I get those people understanding, why they might want to do a monolift meet, why they might want to at some point get into equipped lifting, why they might want to some point do a single lift event, why they might want to train with a crew versus train solo on a snowflake program in a 24-hour gym under all the special circumstances, why they might want to kind of sacrifice a little bit of their time so they could benefit the community at large, or actually have a regular training partner maybe a few times a week. So one of the things that we're trying to do to kind of like maybe kind of meet people in the middle is do something like a hybrid style program where we understand that people's the lives are hectic and maybe they can't train with a crew like 4 times a week, but maybe they could train with a crew once or twice a week, and then they can kind of get their quote unquote snowflake program that's more individualized on the other days. But I do think there's a lot of value of being under the same squat bar as a group of teammates, being under the same bench as a group of teammates on occasion, even if that's a few times a month, if that's once a week. Learning to like work in with each other, I think is so important. Are you only going to be around when you're competing for a meet, or are you around when you're in the off season and can you chip out and spot at an event? Can you learn to judge? Can you learn to do the scorekeeping? Can you volunteer your time for the weekend? And again, with our meets, we tend to focus. I am going to be involved with RPS Nationals next year in a higher role, more hands-on. But just generally, my focus is the smaller, intimate events, 15 to 30 people. Try to be more hands-on, teaching the newer lifters the rules, the standards that we like to abide by, and also get them prepared for higher standards if they do want to do a more national or higher level competition, or maybe in a federation that has more quote unquote strict judging. um, I want to just kind of cater to those people, and I still am working with some high level athletes. I'm still will do that if they're, as long as it's not taking away from our mission at large. I want to get more barbells in people's hands, like Meg Squat says. I want to expose more people to just strength in general, the benefits of strength training. I want to show people what it means to be part of a team, be part of a community. So the hybrid training is something that I think is kind of good, where we can kind of meet people in the middle. Um, Doing more local events, doing more educational events. And so essentially, like as far as my like for the business, itself, coaching is what I do. Coaching is what I do for a living. In terms of the other stuff, the educational events, the powerlifting meets, if those make a little bit of money, that's great. If even keeping the New York gym open is a good example. It's not really a moneymaker, but if that provides a home for people to train and a venue for people to compete on, I'm all for keeping it open. But I only have so much bandwidth. I only have so much resources financially, time wise. Um, so I'm just kind of like want to throw that out there as far as like what I'm trying to do in terms of the sport of powerlifting. And I don't know, like, and again, just at the end of the day, I'm a strength coach, and I want to get so if I can expose if people want to compete in powerlifting, if people want to compete in strict curl, if people want to just learn how to use the barbell for general fitness, whatever avenue that kind of takes people, I want to kind of expose people to that. And if I could do that in like a team setting and a group setting, I do offer a lot of remote coaching. I have people in England, I have people all over the United States. I've had people, in Canada and other countries in Australia. And I've had people all over the world, work with me, over the years. And one of the things that's really cool is that, especially even some of the people in England have come over to visit in person, and we have a lot of people that kind of actually come to our events. They'll travel to our events, and that's super helpful because over time, I've also invested a lot of dollars in travel, and for most of my career, I've that's just been an out-of-pocket expense for me. I'm trying to be more reasonable and kind of more mindful of expenses and finances and things of that nature. But I'm always grateful when some of our remote team can sign up from one of our local events, or if we can kind of get them in like an RPS Nationals and kind of work with them in person, which we had a couple of people. We had some of our local lifters and some of our remote team kind of share a platform together, which was really special. So when people kind of throw around the word team, it's fine to have a group Zoom meeting, and we do those things, and it's fine to, share a platform with someone here and there. But if you could kind of train with someone regularly, if you can kind of support your local gym, support your local powerlifting crew, support your local events, these are just some things I think about. Um, and if you can kind of maybe meet some of the old heads with the new ideas in the middle, I think that would be great because I am trying to be mindful of what the new generation wants, what they're voting with. Because ultimately, you vote with your dollars, you vote with your likes, you vote with your attention. But just consider the long-term ramifications and the long-term benefits of who you're supporting. Because ultimately, as you get older, as you kind of get into the open division, I think it's as you get more obligations, it's just harder and harder to kind of do what you did in your early 20s. It's going to be harder and harder for you to do 6 days of SBD if you have kids. It's going to be hard for you to do super high frequency 3 hour workouts when you have a career, when you have a wife, when you have a husband. But could you train with a crew like once or twice a week for 90 minutes? Could you share a squat bar with your friends for 90 minutes? Could you share a bench bar? Can you get under the same bench with your buddies, once a week instead of going out to the bar? You meet them at the barbell. So, anyways, these are just some thoughts that I'm pondering, and I want to kind of just share like what my direction is and kind of where we're going and what we want to do. But at the end of the day, I just want to provide good information that's going to be useful for a long period of time because ultimately, I want strength training to be part of people's lives for as long as possible. And if that means competing, that's great. If that just means, training, for your own personal goals, that's great too. But I think that if you can do it within a community, that's going to be the best for long-term results, and it's going to be more meaningful. It's going to feel more fulfilling. And if it's more fulfilling, it's more meaningful, you're going to stick with it. So I hope I think I got my thoughts out in a good way, but I think it's just important that just understand again when you're voting with your dollars, when you're voting with your attention, who you're supporting and what you're supporting. Don't get caught up with federations. Don't get caught up with politics. Because when you're under the bar, we're all equals. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're just trying to be stronger. So I'll leave you with that. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please share it. Please give it a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and see you soon.